You know, it's easy for us to get really mad about how expensive hardware and stuff is. And we can also get really upset over the fact that there's just been crap games launched over, like, I'd say the last 5 years easily, just nothing to get excited about. And with the amount of people that are talking about the fact that they're trying to build their first gaming rigs or they just recently got into PC, it got me thinking there's probably some amazing games that people have never played and never experienced that are worth looking at. And no, this isn't gonna be like strange games on Steam. Like, these are like legendary games of all time. So we're gonna do a top 10 best PC games of all time, ranked by how many copies sold, estimated anyway. Hopefully to give you guys some ideas of games maybe you've missed out on that's worth going back and playing. Because fortunately this list is kind of old enough to where you can sort of play all of these on a potato. Arguably the best thing about this video is going to be the debates that are going to take place down in the comments. And this is purely debatable, subjective commentary by using a definitive, like easily measurable, quantifying figure like copies sold. So let the arguments and the fanboyisms begin, because when it comes to our favorite games, it is so subjective. That's why I had many different ways I could have ranked this. I could have gone by most influential in terms of technological showcasing, or maybe what it did to drive particular games forward. I could have created a list of games that were notorious for driving forward the technology to run the games, like the hardware, engines, so many things. That's why I chose to go with player count or overall copies sold, because that is the most quantifiable number. So let's go and kick things off with number 10, what I feel is the best PC games of all time. Now you're gonna notice some of these games are cross-platform, but the numbers I'm showing here are as best as we can determine the PC count. But most of these games either ports to PC or PC port to console. Regardless, it doesn't change the fact that these are fucking amazing games, all right? And if you've missed out on these, they're all available today still. So let's just go back and maybe replay some of them, even if you've already played them. I'm about to work my way through this list too. So number 10, we gotta go all the way back to 1993. It is the original Doom. With an estimated 10+ million copies sold. It's an interesting number because one, it has obviously been around for 33 years, right? That's a long time for a game to be around and still playable. You can still find it. It's kind of a hard number to quantify though, because Doom had a massive amount of shareware. It was back when shareware was a thing. It was like, here, play a few levels of our game for free, and if you like it, buy the full copy. The good old days. But Doom laid the foundation for almost everything you know today when it comes to first-person shooters and PC multiplayer online, especially with like death matches and such. People like to attribute Quake and Wolfenstein to being the true godfather of FPS, but no, it was Doom. And one of the first mods I ever played on Doom, because Doom was moddable, was the Simpsons Doom mod, where you're running around as Homer Simpson and donuts, and the way you would like power yourself back up was eating donuts, and you'd have Krusty the Clown as bad guy. It was one of the first mods I had ever seen in PC gaming, and it just absolutely changed the entire landscape of what a shooter was and could be when it comes to PC. Now, overall playing time is 8 to 10 hours for the original campaign, and it has endless hours today still with mods and stuff that are available. And obviously the mod list just grew and grew and grew over the decades, and there are still dedicated diehard Doom players and online servers if you search for this game. But yeah, although it may not have the biggest player base, it definitely is still touted as one of the best made games of all time. Moving on to number 9, Portal 2. The first time I ever played Portal 2 was actually at DreamHack when I was playing with Phil. And it is such an amazing game. It's got 10+ million copies sold, and most of these are gonna say plus because they're still sort of constantly going up. It came out in 2011, so we're talking 15 years ago. But Portal 2 is often praised as being one of the most perfectly paced and designed games ever. Clever physics-based puzzles, sharp humor. Yeah, the commentary is hilarious when it comes to the computer. Phil still loves to quote so many good one-liners from that game.
Such good writing.
Yeah, and it's things we miss today, trust me. Anyway, and while relatively short, it leaves a lasting impression, and its co-op mode adds replay value. Like for Phil, as someone that has beaten all of those puzzles, remembers most of them and had to refigure out some, watching me fail at it was the replay value for him.
Wait, hold on.
You did that on purpose, didn't you? Maybe.
Portal 2 proves that quality can outweigh sheer length. Now, when it comes to playing time on the game, it's estimated to be 8 hours in single player mode and has a good 15 to 20 hours in co-op and replays. And again, it's a lot of fun to go out and experience that game for the first time through someone else's eyes, especially if you've already played it. Now, number 8, this is probably gonna be a controversial one about where it lands on the chart, and that is Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 came out in 2004. It's got over 15 million copies sold, which probably sounds very low by today's standards, but think about PC gaming in 2004. It was nowhere near as widely spread or as common in people's homes in 2004 even as it was today. Now compare that 15 million copies in 2004 versus how many gaming PCs were probably sitting in homes or lack thereof in 1993. So that should really give you some impressions on how influential and how important Doom was, that there were even that many copies that could be accounted for as sold outside of shareware and even ransomware, geez. And even outside of bootlegged and pirated copies. Pirating games back then was actually really, really easy, so that's why the numbers are really skewed. Now, Half-Life 2 revolutionized FPS games by removing traditional cutscenes and letting the story unfold naturally through gameplay. And its physics-based puzzles and combat felt groundbreaking at launch, and its source engine powered an entire generation of mods in PC games. And it's shorter than many modern titles, but incredibly dense and influential, at 13 hours average game time for the main story, and over 30 plus hours available for average gameplay time when it comes to mods and replays. But the reason why it lands at number 8 on this chart and not higher is specifically because of that copies sold sort of thing. But it probably belongs as number 1 if we were doing a list of most important PC games of all time, because it's what launched Steam. Number 7 comes to us from 2011 when it launched on console, but in 2012 when it launched on PC, and that is Dark Souls. Dark Souls is one of those games that even 15 years later now from when it launched on console, you still hear people ask, man, did you ever play Dark Souls? Did you ever play Dark Souls? And people are constantly replaying through Dark Souls. But with an estimated 30 million players plus, Dark Souls is infamous for its difficulty, but its real appeal lies in the interconnected world and subtle storytelling. And the game explains very little, forcing players to learn through failure and exploration. The exact kind of game that usually loses me as a player because I have ADHD and I get bored very quickly. So if I don't get handheld through some of these games, I lose interest, but that's why I'm probably gonna go back and try Dark Souls again, because it's not a title that I ever completed by any stretch of the imagination. But every shortcut unlocked and boss defeated just feels earned.
Like it gives you a sense of pride and accomplishment?
Not as much as Darth Vader. But on PC, community fixes and mods helped solidify its long-term legacy. That's the thing, when you mod a game from console, a lot of its shortcomings or things people don't like, you put it on PC and you get the modding community at it, you get a whole new game. But it has about 42 hours of playthrough time for the first playthrough and an estimated more than 100 hours of replays, especially if you're going after things like mastery or trying to be a completionist and find every aspect of the game and complete that. Now it's ranked number 7 because it spawned an entire Souls-like genre. In fact, you've heard many games referred to as, oh, it's very Souls-like. I mean, how many games can be basically attributed with saying an entire genre of games is based on that game? Now, number 6 was actually kind of surprising to me. It's not a game I personally enjoyed, but maybe I should go back and try it again. It came to us in 2015, and I'm talking about The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It's actually a game I benchmarked quite a bit in the early days of my YouTube career. Remember, I started in 2012. This came out in 2015. It was a pretty difficult game to run when it came by engine standards back then. In fact, it really pushed the envelope of what you needed hardware-wise to run a game. And that's why I said earlier, if we wanted a list that was about what games drove the need to upgrade your system because it was just so cutting edge, Wild Hunt, or The Witcher 3, was definitely one of those. Now, it has an estimated 50 plus million copies sold, and The Witcher 3 is known for its writing more than its size, but it excels at both. Every quest feels meaningful, often presenting morally gray decisions with lasting consequences. The world is dense, it's dark, it's alive, and PC players benefit from mods and visual upgrades to keep it looking modern. And it's a game where side quests can rival the main story. In fact, how many games can actually say entire successful TV series have been based on them? Actually, we're getting more of those today. I feel like screenplay writers are getting a lot lazier and they're just kind of going into stories that have already been created. And that's why you're getting games like, or TV shows like Fallout, you're getting TV shows obviously like The Witcher, and most recently with The Last of Us. Although that one's become very controversial in many ways, but we won't talk about that today. But when it comes to gameplay, it's got about 52 hours of main story, but with an estimated 150 to 200 plus hours with DLC and a completionist mindset, trying to finish everything. Now it's ranked number 6 because longevity is driven by word of mouth, expansions, the next Netflix crossover bringing a lot of interest, like to what is The Witcher, and then realizing it's based on a game. A lot of people would go, oh, I'm gonna go and play that game. Kind of like The Last of Us sort of got a re-injection of life, even though the title had come out years ago as a Sony exclusive. So one of the reasons why The Last of Us really isn't on this list, because it only launched on PC over the last few years. And again, it was not it was a Sony exclusive title. So it hasn't enough time to have the player base to really make its way on this list. But with its continued PC upgrades and a dedicated player base today, you can't deny that The Witcher 3 belongs on this list. Now you'll notice as we move up the list here, we're moving out of very story-driven games. I mean, they're all gonna have stories to them in some way, but you'll notice a larger world growing on these titles where it's much more sandbox and you can really kind of choose your own adventure. You can follow the main storyline or you can just kind of do whatever the hell you want. Now you have to play the main stories to usually progress the game, but once you progress to the next phase of the game, then it becomes an open world sandbox once again. Now number 5, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, a game I personally cannot play. I've tried and tried to get into it, but everyone knows the line, I used to be an adventurer until I took an arrow to the knee.
I used to be an adventurer, just like you, before I took
Right? It became infamous. It came out in 2011. It's got more than 60 million copies sold. And Skyrim drops players into a massive fantasy world that lets them decide who they want to be, a hero, a villain, a mage, a warrior, a wanderer, and the main story is only a small part of the experience. And on PC, mods transformed Skyrim into everything from a hardcore survival game to an entirely new RPG. And it's a game that people don't just finish, they return to for years. And that doesn't even account for the modding side of Skyrim. Skyrim has incredible mods, not just from like texture packs and making the game look prettier. It's just got endless possibilities of what the game could be. You could end up with an entirely different game than what you started with once you start modding it. But obviously when it comes to just player count alone, and obviously being an extremely influential game, has truly earned its top 5 spot when it comes to best PC games of all time. Now number 4 is Red Dead Redemption 2. It launched in 2018 for console and came out in 2019 on PC, but with over 60 million copies sold, Red Dead Redemption is a slow-burning, cinematic, open-world game focused on realism and character depth. Set in the final days of the Wild West, it emphasizes immersion, horse riding, survival systems, and emotional storytelling. And on PC, it's also a technical showcase often used for GPU benchmarking, and more than 50 hours of actual gameplay when it comes to story, and more than 150 hours for the exploration and completionist aspect of the game. It has a lot to offer. I personally never finished the game. I got pretty far into it, but I never finished it. But it's a title that even though it came out 6 years ago at this point, even to this day, young players who are kind of getting into PC for the first time are finding this title, requesting it, and playing it. My daughter being one of those people. She spent hours upon hours on Red Dead, and a lot of time just kind of developing her own little story when it comes to exploration and such. I mean, who could forget that first mission where you gotta rob the train. I mean, everything goes wrong right at the start, and it really sets the precedent of what is expected in that game. It's often referred to as the GTA 5 of the Wild West. It truly does have its own nuances that make it separate from something like GTA 5, but obviously it's got a huge, huge world available that you can just turn the game into anything you want. And because it's another one of those games that has a lot of morality decisions, and decisions that you make kind of start to pave the way the game goes ahead of, from that decision-making point, you can have a lot of replay value by starting from the beginning and making different choices along the way. Now 3, 2, and 1 are definitely going to lead to a lot of discussion down below. And I'll be surprised when it comes to player count. I expected what I'm about to say is number 3 to be higher. And that is World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft came out in 2004. It was obviously based on a very well-established lore system when it comes to Blizzard's Warcraft, Warcraft 1, Warcraft 2, Warcraft 3. There were obviously some little offshoot games even in the middle of that. We've come a long way from the clicking on a peon and clicking on some trees and clicking an axe and going, oh, what is it? What you want? When it comes to the peons. From a top-down type of game to becoming the incredibly large universe that it is now. World of Warcraft has over 100 million copies sold. And I think to this day, it still has over 30 million active subscriptions when it comes to player base. World of Warcraft defined what an MMO could be, combining accessible combat with massive social systems like guilds, raids, and PvP for many players. WoW wasn't just something you played, it was something you lived. And as somebody that got sucked into the game, had so many characters that were either specific for PvP. I got into Gladiator rank when it comes to PvP back in the early days of like Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm, and the amount of time you could spend just with PvP, let alone PvE raids. I was a part of raiding guilds that were going for like server first, never world first, but server first, getting up at crazy hours in the morning to play with players from all around the world. It was just such a time sink, and it almost, like, it's a dangerous game because I think a lot of players would agree, once you get sucked into that level of game, it can actually take over your life in a bad way. So that's why that's a title that you hear people talk about it and you'll hear, oh, I can't go back to that game, I don't have the time, or like me, once I kind of got out of that addiction level of World of Warcraft from the late 2000s to early 2010s, I can never get back into it the way I used to, and that's a good thing. I just don't have the time for that. But fortunately, the game has evolved so much over the years. That's one of the reasons why it maintains being such a relevant title 22 years after it launched. Blizzard's continued to do engine updates, it's continued to do graphical updates, it's continued to do system updates, gameplay style updates, and actually over the years, making it a little more simplified to where someone like me can hop on for an hour or two at a time and actually feel like they accomplished something. Where back in the day, and especially if you're replaying any of the classic games of Warcraft, because they did relaunch Classic, where it's just a reboot of the exact same way it was back then in a very grind scenario, you realize just how simplified and more casual the game has become. And that's one of the reasons why it maintains its popularity today. No PC game has ever held players for as long and at the scale that World of Warcraft has. And I think EverQuest players that are still playing right now are probably getting really upset. But you have to admit, more players recognize World of Warcraft who've never even played the game than probably EverQuest. But that's why these top three are very controversial. Now the player counts are getting pretty massive here. If 100+ million for World of Warcraft sounded huge, number 2's Grand Theft Auto 5 at over 190 million copies sold since 2013 make it one of the best-selling titles of all time. Period. It's one of the reasons why the hype for GTA 6 is so high. It's also why we just are patiently waiting, or impatiently, depending on who you are, for it to launch. We keep seeing these teasers of like GTA 5's world versus the size of GTA 6's world, where you could fit like 3 GTA 5s into GTA 6 just in map size. The storylines on GTA 5 were insane. Blend cinematic crime story with one of the most open-ended cities ever built. Players switch between 3 protagonists while freely exploring Los Santos, engaging in missions, chaos, or side activities. And on PC, mods and GTA Online, especially RP servers, turn it into a long-term social and creative platform. It's less a game and more persistent digital playground. It's like the FPS version of World of Warcraft. Now, unfortunately, the game was also plagued with hacking and all kinds of other scenarios that made it very unenjoyable for people to go in online. But fortunately, you could stay offline and on that game and still play in any way you want and be anybody you want to be in that game. Whether you want to be someone that's going, that's kind of. Have you ever driven around in GTA 5 and actually tried to follow the traffic laws? I have. It's very difficult because you start to become very enraged and doing what it is you can do in real life, which is pushing cars out of the way, driving on sidewalks, and just degaffing the entire existence. You can do that on GTA 5. You can choose who you want to be. Now, it's got 32 hours of official story and about 100 to 500 plus hours if you account for online gameplay and mods. And that's one of the reasons why, to this day, it maintains being one of the most popular and influential PC games of all time. And that's why we're still all holding our breath, obviously, for GTA 6. Please, Rockstar, don't f it up. So number 1 should be no surprise, at over 300 million copies sold, Minecraft. Now, Minecraft is funny. It's one of those titles that narrow-minded people look at and go, it's just building blocks. Why the hell would I want to jump on Peter and build building blocks? I don't know why I went Southern for that, but to me, it's just what I imagine when I hear people whining and complaining about it. Sorry for my Middle America and Southern folks there. It's just what I hear, okay? I'm sorry. But it came out in 2011, and it is the ultimate sandbox game. There's no fixed story, no defined endpoint. Players mine resources, build massive structures, automate systems, or survive endlessly generated worlds. And what makes Minecraft legendary is that it doesn't end when the credits roll, because there are no credits that matter. On PC especially, and Java Edition, mods and multiplayer servers turn it into an infinite platform for creativity. Now, it's got about a 50-hour casual playtime expectancy. Now, this is not taking into account any of there actually is Minecraft story mode now. Like, there really is. There's missions, there's now, because of the merger between Mojang, I always want to say Mahjong because of the game, but Mojang and Microsoft, when Microsoft acquired it, they added things like story mode and other types of modes in there, official gameplay, storylines, and mini games and all that. This isn't even accounting for any of that. It's just saying on average, a player would probably spend about 50 hours plus on that game. And it truly goes into the thousands of hours, impossible to quantify amount of gameplay possibility when you start talking about mods, not just how the game is played, but I've spent, I don't know how many hours not playing the game, but just screwing around with things like shaders and texture packs and seeing how you can make this really chunky, blocky world turn into something absolutely gorgeous on the same structure of just blocks. I've played it with my kids. Every single person on the planet probably has heard of Minecraft. Whether because of the fact that it started on PC, it's now available on mobile, it's available on tablet, it's available on console, it's just everywhere. And that's why it ranks number one. There's no denying Minecraft, when it comes to player count and it comes to copies sold, is absolutely number one. In fact, it has become a learning tool. It's constantly used in different STEM environments when it comes to learning centers and schools. Minecraft is more than just a mindless building game. You actually have to think. And if you really start to think about what you can do with redstone and start building out things that actually operate, it's a true engineering tool as well. It's one of those games that when my kids asked, Dad, can I have Minecraft? It was like, absolutely, go ahead. They don't get to go play online very much. But when it comes to just what it does for your brain, was literally a no-brainer, and that's why it's number one on my list. Now, we have a couple of honorable mentions here. Titles that I looked at and I went, God, these are still hugely popular titles that if you've never played them, you deserve to play them. Number 3 on my 3 honorable mentions is Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike started as a mod on Half-Life, and it evolved into one of the most important competitive shooters of all time. Its tight gunplay, economy system, and round-based structure defined tactical FPS, and on PC, Counter-Strike built LAN culture, esports, and Steam itself, and few games have such a long-lasting competitive presence. It's got about 15 hours of average gameplay, but for many people, it's got more than 15 years of gameplay. And it's obviously been evolved over the years. I played the original Counter-Strike beta, I played 1.0, I played CS 1.3, I played Counter-Strike Source, and then it morphed into Counter-Strike Go or Global Offensive, and then just renamed to Counter-Strike 2. But it, again, is one of the most influential modern titles on progressing the FPS and competitive FPS. Now, number 2 on my honorable mentions is StarCraft Brood War. Easily, like the StarCraft series as a whole, is extremely responsible for the popularity of RTS, or real-time strategy games. And you might be going, well, why isn't League of Legends on here? And League of Legends, whatever. Obviously, League of Legends and StarCraft is different. We're talking MOBA versus RTS, but I digress. StarCraft alone, and specifically Brood War, is one of the most influential real-time strategy games ever created. Its near-perfect balance and high skill ceiling turned it into a competitive esport long before esports were even mainstream. And on PC, it became a cultural phenomenon, especially in South Korea, and remains a benchmark for competitive RTS design decades later. StarCraft definitely deserves to be on this list somewhere. Now, number 1 is my personal addition to this. I kind of did some cross-referencing here to come up with the top 3, but that's the Mass Effect trilogy as a whole. Like, it deserves to be on here. The problem was each individual title didn't really make the cut when it came to copies sold, but as a trilogy, absolutely makes the cut. Now, Mass Effect Trilogy is one of the most ambitious narrative RPG games ever made, spanning 3 games, and it lets player choices carry forward across an entire sci-fi saga, shaping characters, alliances, and endings. And the series set the standard for choice-driven storytelling, squad relationships, and cinematic RPG presentation. And on PC, mods and the Legendary Edition have kept it relevant for a new and returning players alike. Like, that's what I kind of like, when a studio will take an older game and then remaster it with newer engines and newer hardware to make the game even that much more beautiful. And sometimes, let's face it, we try not to be so, it's a great story, but the graphics suck. I mean, let's be honest, the graphics a lot of the times is what keeps us If the gameplay is good, usually you can get through bad graphics, but really bad graphics are usually what turn a player off. Now, fortunately, Mass Effect didn't have bad graphics. It's just the game stayed relevant for so long, it really started to show its age, and then the Legendary Editions really kind of brought that back. But if you've never played it, it's got about 90 to 120 plus hours across the trilogy. It's pretty cheap. You definitely deserve playing it if you never have. Now, obviously, this is going to be a very subjective list for many of you. It's quantified by the players and the copies sold, but I'm sure many of you are gonna have a very different list, and I'm curious as to what makes your top 10. Now, some of these games are legendary because you play them forever, and even people who've never played them have heard of them. So, as much as PC sort of sucks right now, you see by the years that these games were launched, almost any PC that's out there today could probably play these titles if you just adjust the settings, if it's more some of the more newer ones like 2018. But go out there, if you've never played these, give them a shot. They're extremely cheap on Steam these days, and it just might change your perspective on what it is we really need right now, which isn't bigger, badder hardware. It's just spend more time like diving into these stories.